Welcome back to Stitches Instead of Band-Aids, where we talk about long-term solutions that will actually fix things instead of the Band-Aids that most people offer us. I'm here with Chris, and because it's
Hi.
midnight, we're gonna start off by saying happy birthday to him because it's his birthday today, officially. So,
It is indeed the first thing I'm doing on my birthday.
hey, this is fun, right? This is birthday fun.
Sure.
Okay. This is sometimes birthday fun, but I think tonight's going to be a little depressing
It could
because
be fun, but this episode is not going to be fun
yeah, especially
because yeah.
because a lot of things that have happened recently, and we are actually going to cover three stories. Three stories that that have happened recently since, well, not necessarily since um last episode, but kind of have to do with our current state of things and why, like, when we started these episodes, I think we had the idea that maybe that our solutions could actually work. Oh, is this not recording? Yeah, no, everything's working.
I
So,
don't know.
um,
Yeah.
had this idea that these solutions could work, but several things have made it less likely if it's even possible to work.
Yeah.
So,
So the the broader issue is that for a solution to really work, you don't have to just describe the problems and the end goal, which is what we've already done. There, you have to understand where you're at currently in order to make a plan of how to get to where you want to go. And
and
right now, yeah, that seems harder and harder as time passes.
so let me go ahead here. I'm going to pull up our three stories that we are going to go over to kind of give everyone an idea of where we are at currently. Because where we are at currently is not a good place to be. Um, so I'm just going to pull these up real quick.
Okay.
Uh, that one, that one, and this one. Okay. Let's see. We'll start with Micaiah, and then go traffic stop, and then Seattle. Okay. Those are going to be how we're going to do these stories. Okay. And here we go. So, this is shifting here. And as you can see, we have a Vox article here, titled why they're not saying Micaiah Bryant's name. And this gets into basically, if y'all don't know, Micaiah Bryant was shot by Columbus police when they were responding to a call. She was the body cam video from the cop shows her attacking with a knife two individuals, two women. One fell to the ground. The other one she pinned to a car, and she was mid thrusting the knife when the cop shot her, and she died from the wounds. Okay. And this article, what happened afterwards is kind of what you can expect. Black Lives Matter had protests demanding justice for calling it an unjustified shooting, and that people that what the cop did was not correct, right? And I don't know how much personally, I don't know how much clearer of a justified use of force you can get, minus someone actually killing someone else first, because this was just prior to that. And I mean, to give you an idea of how little time people have in situations with knives, right? The cop drew his weapon as soon as she started charging the first woman, and between the first woman going down and her pinning and mid thrust of the second woman is about 4 seconds, 4.5 seconds, about, right? And with that, that's a time for an officer to take aim and fire, right? But to give you an idea, like, if the officer had not pulled their gun as soon as the stuff started,
You're breaking up on me.
I'm breaking up on you. Oh, I am
Yeah,
losing.
and you're sounding very.
Okay, give me a second here. Gonna take a look at network performance here. Okay, is this any better?
Yeah, that sounds better right now.
Okay. I guess I can't just have my second to second updates of stocks going in the background. Too much.
Yeah.
Too much
Game right
bandwidth.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to give you an idea, enforce like
Anyway,
it was he did not have time to do anything else if he was going to save someone from being stabbed. But the point I want to kind of let me see here. That okay. So what this article basically says is that the media isn't focusing on Micaiah Bryant because she had a knife, and a lot of people are saying, well, she's the one, she was brandishing a knife, and so because of that, um, because of that, she's the aggressor, and we're not going to focus on it. Now, right here in this article, I want to read just this one little portion right here. It says, crisis response experts noted, however, that de-escalation tactics like commanding Bryant to drop the weapon, physically getting between the women, or simply communicating with her could have kept everyone alive. Um, that sentence right there, like, sure, I guess there was a crisis response expert that has said that. But the cop was there for like 10 seconds. Um, he managed to get in between Micaiah and the first woman who she went after with a knife. And then she goes after a second one. I'm not sure how the cop was supposed to get in between. He did say drop the knife like 2 or 3 times, or drop it, um, talking about the knife and trying to communicate with her. But by the time he pulled the trigger, there was mid stab. And I don't know about you guys, but I didn't know officers were expected to be as fast as like the Flash, to be able to move and cover like a 6 foot distance in like less than a second. I mean, is that even possible to cover 6 feet in less than a second from zero to start? I mean, I don't think it is personally, but it might be for some like Olympic athletes. Um, but I feel like that is getting into the realm of beyond reasonable expectations of our police force. What would you say, Chris, to that?
Yeah,
Chris?
yes, I would say that is beyond reasonable expectation of police because the digging deeper into this, Vox, that paragraph links to a psychologist who wrote an article for Vox about um, de-escalation tactics, including ones she's used and trained other departments on, and ultimately the the difference between the situations that she seems to conflate are ones where, oh, there is a weapon present, and oh, the weapon is being swung. And ultimately, the issue in the Bryant case is not, oh, she had a knife. It is, she was swinging that knife. You can see her swinging it. I mean, I am fine with people having weapons to defend themselves. I am fine with the idea of, oh, you're afraid, which is what they say about Bryant. She was in some kind of uh, escalating confrontation, so she grabbed the knife. She apparently was the one who called 911. That is perfectly reasonable if you need to defend yourself. Problem is, police arrive in a situation with less information than they possibly could have, in part because Bryant was the one who called them, and then she got off the phone. It's not what you do as someone who wants police response, because the thing is, and as with another situation that uh, this psychologist was in that she documents, uh, you need information going in, and police officers don't always have a lot of information going in oftentimes people who call 911 don't give a lot of information going in. And when you arrive to a situation where you don't necessarily know what's going on, and there is an act of violence in the midst of being done, because if you watch the body cam footage, she is not just standing there holding a knife. She is not standing there waving a knife in the air. She is swinging that knife.
And she charged 2 people. So
when people are responding to a crisis, and you can't just, as a police officer, is not just like a normal person, is not turning the corner into an alley and going, oh, somebody's running at somebody else with a knife, somebody's swinging a knife. You do not just turn around and go the other way, because that's not what police do. That's what a lot of normal people would do. But police get called in to deal with the problem. They do not get called to ignore the problem.
yeah, and I
And
mean, it's a tragedy. Like, someone lost their life, right? We're not trying to say this isn't a tragedy. It's still a tragedy whenever anyone loses their life. And, you know,
and
it's going to happen, though, in policing.
And to me, this article makes good points about other qualifiers, because she was the one who called 911. Now, she didn't give a lot of information. I don't think she even was able to communicate what various people looked like to the 911 operator. And it is important for an average citizen to realize that police are not omniscient. And you show up, and sometimes you can de-escalate situations. Oftentimes, if the weapon is just being held, it can be hard, but it is definitely doable to get people to put down their weapons if they are not, like, in the midst of swinging a knife, pointing guns at each other with fingers on the trigger kind of deal. But the problem is that when a person, regardless of reasons for their actions, starts that swing, puts their finger on the trigger of an aimed gun, that is the point at which you go from a theoretical threat to a realized threat, and it goes from de-escalation is possible to stop situation by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's take... I mean, this is one instance, right? This is just kind of one of the more recent instances that's big. And this kind of shows you that media, protesters are wanting even Micaiah to... they're protesting over her death at the hands of police. And this is like one of the more clear-cut cases of what we would consider authorized use of force, right? And this was in defense of someone else. It was literally mid swing of a knife, and if the cop did not act, someone was going to get hurt. This isn't
Yeah.
something where
So
someone was going to come out not injured, and a lot of people don't realize this, but you can die fairly quickly from a knife wound if
mm,
if it's in the right place. And I can't tell you where that knife was going to go based off of the video. I mean, some people say it was aiming for her neck, for her face, for her upper chest. Um, I mean, it did look like it was kind of going for the upper portion of the body. And if it hit a lung, if it hit the heart, if it hit any of the major arteries in that area, she could have been dead before anyone could have rendered aid.
right,
Like,
and the article here quotes their expert uh, posing a question that quote, is it worth considering whether Bryant might have still been alive today if a mental health expert or someone else trained in nonviolent de-escalation had responded to the call, end quote. And yes, I think Bryant would definitely be alive. Yes. The issue is what happens to the person she's swinging the knife at, because she's not just this expert is making a false equivalence between other situations she's been in where people have had knives, because she's not she's swinging the knife, and it's it is it is an issue where if there was not the ability to respond in this manner, it is very likely someone gets slashed or stabbed. And while it's not incredibly common for a single slash or stab wound to kill, it is definitely a possibility. And that is textbook deadly force, assault with a deadly weapon, potentially murder, and that is the reason that cops have guns.
mm-hmm. So with that, we're moving on, and like, this gives us the idea that protesters who are wanting these reforms and stuff, at least on this side, like right here, all right, in this particular case, are willing to say that cops shouldn't have shot Bryant. And that's their position. And it's, well, if they're not allowed to use deadly force when someone else is using deadly force, then they shouldn't have deadly force at all. So when robbers are shooting at cops with guns, they should not have a deadly means to respond. Right? If someone's trying to kill you, right? They don't want the cop to be able to respond with deadly force. That kind of what this boils down to. Because I don't see how you could get much higher escalation other than someone's already been hurt and is in the. You can't even say in the process of committing murder, because Bryant was in the process of trying to stab somebody. Is it only after someone is dead can cops use deadly force with these individuals? I don't know, right? But from this article, just using deadly force on somebody is not enough for them to say that deadly force should be used. So um, it kind of comes. This is kind of to back that up, like where people are with cops, right? This article here is has a video. I'm gonna play that, but is there is a video. This is a traffic stop. This was a video of a traffic stop where a deputy pulled someone over for, I believe she was on her phone while driving. Um, yeah, she was on her cell phone while driving. So, I mean, that right there, I mean, we could pull up the stats, but the statistics, but I mean, that causes a lot of problems where people get into accidents and get hurt, right? That's a safety thing right there. And when he comes up to her window, she just immediately freaks out on him, calling him a murderer. According to this article here, she's recording him because I'm recording you because you scare me, proceeding to calling him a murderer multiple times. Um, you're scaring me. You're threatening to kill me and my sons. Now, if you watch the body cam footage, the deputy does no such thing. He's just like just trying to do a basic traffic stop. It's like, I just want to write you this ticket. It's not safe for you to be on your cell phone while you're driving.
Mm.
And the supervisor's here, and he says he's only citing you for using your cell phone while driving. That's it. There was never any threats of violence or anything like that to this woman. And the woman responded to the supervisor for him being a Mexican racist. Yeah, here you are. Here you go. Mexican racist. You're always going to be a Mexican. You'll never be white. You know that, right? You'll never be white, which is what you really want to be. You want to be white. Okay. So, beyond the connotations of what she's saying here, right? Like, with a cop doing a normal traffic stop, you watch the video, no threats of violence. Deputy is very, very chill for how she's acting. Um, and this is kind of her response to it, right? I would not be surprised to find out she supports Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff, like is a anti police brutality and everything like that, because that's what she sounds like. Like she has a very elevated concern about a police officer even approaching her, and is kind of immediately assumes he's a murderer just because he's a police officer and calls him a murderer multiple times. Um, it's it's a like if people are this upset with police, it's at the point where, like I was saying last time or two times ago, like should they even have police respond to anything in their communities? Like, is there any way for police to do their jobs at any level? And from these two, it sounds like no. Like, these communities don't want the police involved in their community at all. And this brings us to our third one, and which is why we have very serious doubts of any change actually being able to work. And this is regarding the city of Seattle. If this page will load up.
Yeah, so I have it loaded here. And basically, so if our listeners remember the what happened in Chicago, where
No,
they
it's Seattle.
yeah,
Or
Seattle, they set up the a was variously branded as an organized protest and as an autonomous zone in a few blocks of Seattle. Police uh, were not able to come in and break this up for a significant amount of time.
The
They
mayor came out and said it was just going to be a summer of love. I believe was the quote. Uh,
so the police retreated basically in order to regroup one and to give uh, basically because they knew it was an environment where they were not wanted
um,
and they were honestly afraid of further uh, any actions at that time further causing additional tension and potentially developing into uh, a full scale riot and not like, oh, little bit of riot and looting here and there. No, we're talking Rodney King levels where blocks of buildings were being burned.
yeah,
So,
and 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 this article doesn't talk more about it, but they had armed people um, guarding the borders of this autonomous zone and would not let police in, um, and threatened violence against police if they were to go inside of the zone um, in the first place, right? So they set up borders. They guarded those borders with weapons, with guns, and said no police. No police allowed. And then what happened here is uh,
this this led to a confrontation inside this area between uh, two men. Um, let's see, a let's see,
was
it was the victim is 19-year-old Lorenzo Anderson. Don't know exactly why he was there. The shooter was Marcel Long, who's been charged with murder in the first degree, but has yet to be
a
caught.
alleged
Um,
alleged person who shot him, since he hasn't been convicted. It's only alleged until he gets a trial. Because because I at least believe in the presumption of innocence. But
I, I, I guess yes. The alleged shooter is Marcel Long.
wrong.
Might actually have been a different person. Who knows? But there is video of the scene uh, where the shooting happens. It shows both people interacting. And Anderson tries to walk away, and then uh,
Long chases him and supposedly shoots
and
him 4 times.
shoots Anderson 4 times. Now, this is still inside the zone that had been basically at that point become a no-go zone for police, and the fire department and the other emergency services who also uh, basically decided it was a no-go zone. And people at the scene are like, okay, that was you should go in there, but circumstances at the time mean that, and people don't necessarily understand this. The first rule of emergency response is not to become a victim yourself. And they drill this into your head in basically any emergency response course is if you cannot safely respond to an emergency, your first priority is to make it safe, then your priority is to assist. So you do not jump into a flooded river trying to rescue someone if that just means you're going to be another person trying to swim in a flooded river who can't. Okay, now there's two people in a flooded river. Great. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You do not. If a power line is downed and someone is being shocked by this downed power line, you do not go and try and rescue them, because the moment you touch them without proper gear, or potentially just touch the ground next to them,
You are now
without
shocked.
proper gear, yeah, now we have two people being shocked, and that makes it an even bigger problem. So for
And emergency
these,
services do not go into places where there are gunshots going off until it's been secured, usually by police. And
Yeah.
the police will show up first, secure the area, and then bring in paramedics. So,
even Army combat medics are not intended to be frontline, go in front of the lines and grab people who are injured and come back kind of situation, because that makes you a bigger target. You secure the area first. So,
plus you don't
the
want your
medic-
medic shot. So,
yes. So the medics in Seattle went to the police and just went, "Hey guys, secure the scene," and nobody secured the scene.
because
And nobody secured the scene, and Anderson bled out. And now you could argue that securing this, that forcibly disbanding the zone at that time would have been the correct call, and that would have allowed them to render aid. I am not sure about what the broader, both tactical and strategic situation was at the time, how many officers could respond, whether the people the in the zone. I keep thinking I'm playing Stalker because I keep saying the zone. In the zone,
just call it the chop or the chaz.
Yeah, the chop, the chaz. In the chop would have how they would have reacted to that. It's possible that trying to disband the chop at that time would have caused a whole lot more casualties and a significant amount of additional deaths. Just to attempt to save this one man, Anderson. Now, the bigger issue here is then that
the bigger issue here is that
Anderson's mother is suing the Seattle government for not making that choice to go in to secure the scene and render aid. She specifically says, "Explain to me why they didn't go in there and help my son." And yeah, there are reasons. They are not necessarily the best reasons, but there were at the time. I mean, disbanding we'll call it a protest movement, is usually not something that is taken on lightly. Um,
And no, this is in June during kind of the height of the George Floyd protests. And these are Black Lives Matter protesters who set up
right.
this zone. So this mother's like, why didn't you clear out the Black Lives Matter protesters, basically, and go help my son? And I mean, even the protesters were upset that assistance was not given. They call emergency services and they're like, nope, we're not going in. Uh, because they get from the paramedics that the police can't go in and secure the scene, so they're not going to go in until the scene is secure. And like literally, the protesters are getting instructions on how to bring Anderson to the paramedics because they're like 2 blocks away. But the
Mhm.
paramedics will not go in to this zone. And so this is Black Lives Matter, right? They're
At that
upset. Yeah, at this
at that
point.
point, because they've styled themselves as an autonomous zone and they have guards around them. It's basically, oh, hey, imagine it as a border in a disputed country where, oh, you are 2 blocks outside the area that we control right now, and we are not willing to try to risk the potential confrontation that is likely if we go 2 blocks outside of the area we control into area that other people control, and those people are hostile to us.
Yeah, there were literal signs that say leaving leaving the United States. Like they really put an air of we are separate. And the thing is here, they're now suing the city, right?
Yeah.
They're saying the city did something wrong here by not going in to this area and rendering aid. So where we are at between these three stories, right, is one, Black Lives Matter doesn't want the cops to intervene or use deadly force, even when someone is using deadly force against someone else. That is not an acceptable level. Okay? They get upset when you intervene, when the cops intervene. They're so upset with the cops and afraid of them or have people so wound up, whatever the situation might be, with the woman getting a traffic stop, that a basic traffic stop causes them to fear for their lives, right? And so the cops can't even do their jobs without people saying that they're murderers. Okay. So this then shows that they also don't want the cops not to intervene. That if the cops don't intervene, they're also in trouble. They're also in the wrong because then they're not rendering aid. So, like this example right here, if we flipped it, right? Say the officer didn't shoot Micaiah Bryant. Alright? They'd still be upset with the officer for not saving other person the other woman's life, right?
Mhm.
They can't win. This is Black Lives Matter has effectively said we want you to intervene, but we don't want you to intervene. We want you in our communities, but we don't want you in our communities.
Right, and it speaks to deeper divisions in inside anti-police communities, whether that's like in the black inner city, because there are people who might not like the police, but recognize that police are a force of law and order, and that without police, you get anarchy. And that if you want to keep anarchy from happening, if you want to keep things like Anderson's death from happening, if you want to keep gangs from happening, if you want to keep a lot of unsavory things that people do not want in their communities from happening, then you need police. So that runs into the idea that other people have, and this is with the acknowledgement that policing can be flawed, but police are necessary. And that runs into other people in these same communities who believe that policing is so flawed that it is unsalvageable. And that anarchy would, on some level, potentially be a preferred solution. That the CHOP would be better than having the police in control.
And note, the CHOP had two teenage boys, just go on a joyride, okay? Something the police probably would handle without killing anyone, right? Someone just on a joyride. Most of those do not end up with people dying unless you try to run over a cop. Then there's a higher chance of you getting killed by the police.
Or joyride cause a hit and run or something.
Yeah. They shot according to some people, they shot 50 rounds into that vehicle. The security in the CHOP shot 50 rounds into that vehicle, killing those teenagers. And it was for joyriding. That's basically what it was. They were afraid someone was driving through recklessly doing donuts. They figured someone might run that vehicle into a crowd, and so they opened fire. And that's how the CHOP responded to CHOP security responded to kids joyriding. I mean, that didn't get that much media attention. Like it's if we're going to move forward and do police reform, these communities, one, we need to recognize police have a bad reputation, right? They've messed things up. There have been problems. I mean, I would argue against that it's racist, and there's data to support that. Like, I think it's more of a class thing. If you're poor, you're more likely to get killed by the police. That's a statistic, right? If you're a poor person, you're more likely to get shot, regardless if you're black or white. But the idea, though, is that police have made mistakes. Policing system is not where we want it. It is not ideal. We recognize that, but communities also need to recognize that if they don't want to just go into straight up pure anarchy, they need the police to be active in their communities to some degree. And that you can't have this standard where if the police don't do their jobs, you're angry at them. And if the police do their jobs, you're angry at them. That's not how you're going to get reform. That is not an environment where we can make positive change in.
I mean, that's not even really a tenable situation long term, because eventually there is going to be some breaking point, one direction or the other, and there is going to be a conclusion forced. And that, to me, is coming up sometime soon. The way things are going here in America, there is going to be a conclusion one way or the other that is going to be forced in terms of either a very strict limiting of police power in general, which is going to run the risk of an expansion of not of power structures that enjoy there being fewer police and fewer law enforcement efforts, and or there is going to be a significant crackdown that, in order to quote unquote restore law and order, that is going to end up with a lot of unhappy people and potentially even more dead. And neither of those are good solutions. Ultimately, politically, policing is necessary because policing is how you enforce law and order when you have elements of society who may not believe in the law or the structure of order in an area. So you have to have someone at some point who actually enforces the law and the rules that make things. We talked about this. It's just trying to balance what is reasonable is a hard question. And at this point, getting the people who live in an area to accept, to find an agreement on what is the proper level of response is incredibly hard. And it's not just, it's like these articles show, it's not just like really big picture stuff. It's not just, like you go back to the 90s, Waco shouldn't have happened. Because that's really big picture stuff. A lot of people died who didn't necessarily have to die. It was a mess. There were congressional inquiries, bipartisan congressional inquiries, into the FBI's conduct at that time. And then things get murkier. And we end up with people at the street level, in the media, having differing viewpoints. I mean, if I could see a situation, like looking forward, where there definitely is no right way out. Because if you look at like the Bryant case, and let's say you have two 16-year-olds who are actively fighting, not just standing in a room staring at each other while holding knives, but like actively swinging knives at each other. you either end up with the Bryant situation where police show up and just are like, okay, the person who's swinging the knife right now, they're getting shot. And then people don't like that. But if you end up in the same situation and police don't, and then the other person dies, or one of those people dies because police do not act, you're going to have the same situation as this lawsuit against the city of Seattle because they didn't act. So there is no broad consensus on when police should act.
Well, I guess what they want is the police to show up 5 minutes after all the action is done and over with, and to just tape things off and scrub the blood out of the streets, right? That's a very
That,
crude way of putting it, but I guess
yeah, ultimately these solutions are either that the easy solutions are either the police do not respond to anything immediately and are, like you say, a reactive force. If somebody's getting murdered, you let them get murdered and then you catch the killer. You don't try to interrupt that process. Now, that technically has precedent in the way things work. It's why here in America, police do not have a legal duty to protect civilians. This was established because of a subway hijacking case where police did not go into the hijacked subway car because um, they could not react immediately, and it turns out that a person in there actually fought and disarmed the guy who hijacked the car, and then the police came in and marked everything off and arrested the gentleman who had hijacked the car, and then the guy who had in stopping the hijacker gotten fairly severely injured, went to the hospital, uh, spent a lot of money was spent getting him back to health, and then he sued the cops because he was like, why am I doing this? The cops are outside. And they should have done this. If I can do this and I was not armed, the police should have been able to do it. And the court said, well, they could have, but the police do not actually have a
eh,
legal requirement to prevent people from getting injured. So there is the possibility that police just become completely reactive and it's going to take 20 minutes for somebody to come to any kind of 911 call.
yep, and that will be, hey, there's a shooting. Okay, cool. We'll be there in a half hour. Let us know when it's done. Type deal.
Yep.
That, but even that, like, people will be upset with that, and the Seattle,
People will definitely be upset with that.
and that,
And
and that's the Seattle story. Is like, you didn't come quick enough, or you didn't come at all. Actually, in the Seattle story, but I mean, the same thing will happen. It will be a point of, we can't get the police to come out at all, regardless. And it'll be, okay, well, they're not legally required to. And people will be upset about that.
yep, because there has been previously an argument that ruling was bad law and should be overturned. Um, the issue being that overturning that ruling puts an onus on police to intervene in every situation where it is possible for them to intervene, and that means that they start intervening in situations like the Bryant case where they get out of the car and someone's swinging a knife, and well,
They're
uh,
required to intervene.
yeah, we have very little information, but uh, we are required to intervene. Now, currently, he was not required to intervene. He could have legally let whatever happened happen.
Happen.
Now, morally speaking, is there a requirement to intervene if you see a violent act happening as a police officer? Can you? Should a police officer, I mean, not legally speaking, because they can just stand there and watch, but morally speaking, should they just stand there and watch, yell, drop the knife, and just, if they don't, they don't.
Or how about we put it another way? If a woman is being raped, does the police officer have a moral obligation to stop that rape? Like, or
Mhm.
should they just sit to the side and be like, "Hey, can you stop doing that? That's not right." Like, one of these things are it seems like we're getting pushed to, and in all honesty, from what I've been seeing, with police departments are experiencing a massive shortage of officers because they're resigning in mass. Um, I believe it's I believe it's Chicago has a 200 officer shortage at the moment. And I think like New York is short like 500 police officers or something like that. Um, I'm not 100% sure on those numbers. I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head. But like that's huge for a city as big as those cities are. Being short that many cops has got to be a massive strain. And that means like
Right.
beyond that, like that doesn't mean that the police officers stop. No, that means they're making up those hours in overtime. So
Or
officer
that, or it means that there's, instead of one car for this area, instead of two cars, there's now one car, and that means your response time is going to be longer, and the cops are basically forced into a reactive position because they don't have enough people to be proactive.
and
Or it means that they prioritize stopping crimes in progress, but it means that if they find a crime that has already happened, they take the information and then they don't investigate because they don't have any investigators. They only have beat cops who go out and stop crimes as they happen.
yeah,
And
and
that
but it's also
neither
getting to the point of what we talked about last time. They're under such a shortage, they're going to be hiring massively to make up those shortages. And that means a bunch of rookie cops that are more likely to make mistakes and have unjustified shootings. Not less
right.
likely.
Right, because what we talked about last time in terms of training takes time. You can't just create 30,000, 40,000 trained people out of thin air tomorrow. Even if you had the perfect recruits and you offered them money, you'd still need to train them. And you could get them all to say yes, they want to. You still have to train them. And there's not a lot of people in who are currently studying for criminal justice degrees who want to become cops. Most of them want to become lawyers. I mean, theoretically, if you offered them enough money, maybe some of them would become cops, but it's a lot safer to be a be a prosecutor or be a criminal defense lawyer than it is to carry a gun and interrupt crimes.
Mhm. Or even working forensics, where you're always coming in after the fact.
Yeah,
Um,
and it working forensics is a pain because I mean, just like lawyers, you end up exposed to a lot of crimes, and it is not fun. All emergency services people, from police forensics uh,
Paramedics.
to firefighters, they all have a pretty quick burnout time. I mean, it is not a career you have for life most of the time. And if it is a career you have for life, at some point you are desperately moving out of the day-to-day operations where you are exposed to what happens, because I'll be honest, when you're dealing with large groups of people, there's enough people being shitty to each other that there is a constant stream that you get just put in where it's like, oh, there was another crime today. You know, you want to go bag some more evidence? No, no, I don't want to bag more evidence. I've been bagging evidence for the last 300 days.
It's not even getting through a year.
I don't.
Oh,
I do not want to do this
uh,
anymore. Can people just not commit crimes? Can people not hurt each other?
in an
Can
ideal world,
buildings
right?
not burn down so I don't have to go try to rescue people from burning buildings?
Anyway, so this is the landscape that we're
Right.
working in. It's an impossible. They're damned if they
Yeah,
do, damned if they don't.
because
And
any of the reforms that would work that we've talked about would take years in order to um,
implement.
implement.
It would
And
take decades to implement effectively.
and we are in the middle of the swing of a cycle, which has gone on through societies, American and otherwise, where police get more power and less power and more power and less power. And right now, we're swinging back from a fairly strong influence on police power because uh,
Gangs, war on
yeah,
drugs, etc.
the 80s and 90s, even the late 70s, I mean, were a
And the
huge
early
time.
2000s.
Yeah, were a huge time for. It started with taking on the mafia, then it started with. Then it became taking on other criminal organizations, trying to take on drug smuggling, human trafficking, all kinds of unsavory things. And that has that has led to definite issues, and that's led to a swing back in the other direction. It's just it that cycle, those swings mean that there are pretty limited opportunities to try to change things and get it right. And right now is not one of those opportunities.
Yeah, no. And I think we're swinging so hard that we're likely to see police power go from where it currently is to zero. just because the police won't have the manpower to respond.
Yep.
And like honestly, at this point I would suggest be ready to protect yourselves, right? Like you're not going if things continue the way they are, there will not be a police force that will be there that will be able to help you. Um and that'll either be from people quitting because
Mhm.
they can't do their job. Like if they're going to get sued or here's the thing, right? Like as it is right now, if a cop shows up and intervenes, they're risking jail time. And if they don't show up, the city's going to get sued, but at least they won't face jail time.
Mhm.
So, in all likelihood, you're either going to have cops just quit because that's not what they signed up for. They signed up to be able to help.
Mhm.
Or two, or both of these, right? And the second thing is cops are just going to get a call and they're going to sit on their phones for 5-10 minutes before turning on their lights and going. A priority one call is going to mean wait 5 minutes before going.
Mhm.
And either way, the end result is the same, which is there is not going to be a police force to protect you. If someone is robbing you, if someone is trying to kill you, the police are not going to be there to help. They're not going to be able to help you. You're going to be responsible for your own safety. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Like, maybe that'll increase Second Amendment protections and people will be a lot more pro Second Amendment. Um,
Well, like I've talked about, it's a cycle. People do not like having to constantly be responsible for their own safety and security. It is not a fun feeling to have to keep track of everybody else on a street as you walk down that street and start cataloging people for security risk. And honestly, right now, there are some segments of the population that already have to do that, but it is not a good experience. It is constantly stressful. It can cause paranoia because, at some level, you do have to be aware if you're walking down a street on a city where people are in relation to you. Is somebody following you? Is somebody walking towards you specifically? When you do not have the easy ability to call the cops, and there is not a cop car or some kind of way to reach the police on every corner, kind of thing.
yeah,
Because, I mean, ultimately, payphones were a big deal in the early days of New York City because payphones had free 911 dialing. Now on college campuses, you see those emergency uh, pylons that have the buttons on them. So you can go to one of them and you can just slap the button. And then the button calls the police and activates a very bright light and sirens. And oh, hey, the police are coming. And if there's not the ability to do that, you do have to be aware of your own security. And it is not a fun experience um, to try to do that long term. I mean, have known people who have gotten issues from doing that in other countries where there are fewer police and active security threats. It is not a fun experience, and eventually, once people live through that for long enough, there is a demand for a level of law and order and peace to return, and then the government goes, "Oh, you want police funding? You want law enforcement funding? Sure, we can do that." And then it creates this cycle.
Well, I'm concerned because it seems like it honestly seems like we are, when we're talking about this cycle, is that we are in both stages at the same time. Like
Oh,
there's a demand for less police and
mhm.
less security, while at the same time being a demand for more security. That
Right.
maintaining the same security level with less security. Like we want no police and we want to maintain the same security level that we currently have. And we want it now. And it's two opposite forces, right? It's
Yep.
unmovable rock meet unstoppable force. And let's see what happens. And usually things do not end happily when those two sort of things collide.
Right. Because what you're going to see are going to be alternating call more of these kinds of alternating pleas by people to the media from each side where
Well,
they
it's from the
go,
same
"Oh,
side, right? It's the same organization calling for it both
yeah,
ways.
uh, yeah." I mean, speaking of people, just not just organizations, there are going to be lots of people of all kinds of types on both sides of this because you've had like white landowning libertarians who have been calling for less and less police power for decades now. And there have been black inner city families who rent apartments who have been calling for more police for decades because they don't want drug dealers on their block, and vice versa. You have people calling for more police presence in certain areas, regardless of skin color, economic status, what have you. A lot of it boils down to whether you've had good or bad experiences with the cops, because but the first time you call the cops because you need them and they don't show up, that's not a good experience. And the first time you do not call the cops and the cops show up and uh,
Mess
potentially
around with
cause
you.
more issues, yeah, it's that's also a bad experience. And people have bad experiences both ways because, well, the police cannot respond to everything, and even if they responded to everything, they'd be enforcing every single law, and not everybody likes every single law. So that means that people get mad at the police. So you end up with what's been happening to some degree is this kind of strange selective enforcement where police enforce laws that they know are less controversial. I mean, honestly, cell phone laws for traffic stops should not be that controversial. I mean, driving on your cell phone is bad.
Yeah.
And nearly everyone agrees on this. Should not be a controversial thing. But cops tend to try to enforce things that are less controversial in terms of laws. I mean, there's fairly few people who actually um, get get busted on the local level for weapons deals. Most of the time, if somebody is arrested for an illegal weapons thing, they either were stopped for something else. They were not in the police were not intending to enforce a weapons thing, or someone else has called the police and gone, "Hey, this guy is causing issues, and one of those issues is that he is illegally in possession of a weapon." They do not try to go out and like audit every single gun show or every single person who they think might own a gun, because the Second Amendment is a thing, and it's not that it's not a popular thing for people who own guns to deal with. There's a lot of complaints that get filed because, oh, I'm being harassed by police because was exercising my legal right, and it's like, yes, it is a legal right. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I guess we will not send police out to that kind of thing, which in turn means that you end up with no win situations for some communities where where if you end up with a gang who's mostly like high school kids and 20-year-olds kind of thing, you're going to, and you start trying to enforce the law, and they have guns, they have weaponry. Some people people are gonna call the police to get you to deal with the gangs, but then if you try to enforce the law and they fight back, some gang members die, and then parents go, "Oh, why do you kill my kid?"
Oh, that is something that bugs me. Like, I have two children, and I remember how I was raised. And my parents were basically like, if you ever get caught by the cops doing something wrong, we're gonna tell them to just lock you up. Like, you're gonna spend the night in you're gonna spend however much time in jail they want to keep you there. Like my parents would have just said he deserved it. Like I could imagine like if I had done something like that, and media interviewed like my mother or something, like yeah, he was a bad kid. He should have been doing that. He got what he deserved. Um, it's just honestly like some of these parents are like, I get it, right? Like I love my kids. I love my kids like no matter what. But at the same time, if one of my kids were doing something like that wrong, like shooting at cars or something, um first of all, I think that would be a reflection as me as a parent being a complete failure. And I would apologize probably for my kid doing something like that. But I don't get this. He's just a kid. He was a good boy. He was a kind soul. Like, this sort of rhetoric that's being like espoused, right? It's like if they are shooting at people and possibly causing like death to other human beings, they are not a kind soul. Like, period. Full stop. You are not a peaceful person if you're trying to murder somebody in any way, shape, or form. Okay, they might have been a peaceful person at one point, but at this point, they are no longer a peaceful person. They were trying to kill somebody. It's. And this really gets me, right? Like as a community, if you're going to uphold these people as almost saint like, right? Like these are important figures, these are martyrs. Um your martyrs should be people that you can emulate your life after, right? Like if you're going to hold them in such high regard, they should be held in that high regard because of the type of life they lived. That the injustice was not only an injustice, but it was an injustice against someone who was a good person, like that did nothing in their lives that could have facilitated this sort of happening, right? Like there's injustice and then like something unjust happened to somebody, right? And we can be angry about that injustice. But we don't need to martyrize somebody because something unjust happened to them. Like martyrdom is when something unjust happens to you and you were an extremely just and good person. Like beyond normal. You're not just the average day Joe making it through life, right? You're someone who constantly did the right thing, constantly went out of your way to help others. And anyone who had ever met you would only have nice things to say. And then something unjust happens to that person. That's the sort of person you martyr, like you bring up to a martyr type level. Because it's unjust things happen to even good people. But we should still want to emulate their lives, regardless of that injustice. And it makes the injustice all that more, I don't know, like that visceral reaction when when you witness an injustice, like that like gut feeling, like this is wrong. That brings about that gut reaction that a lot of these people feel. Like that is that is an okay feeling to have. That anger that something unjust happened, like that is totally fine. That is a justified feeling. However, like raising these kids and these individuals who are not necessarily the best of people to the point of martyrdom, that they're martyrs for a cause, that's not right either. Like that, like I some of these people, I'm just like, why are you raising these people on pedestals, like for your community to look at as heroes, as role models? They are You do not want to build your community off of these people's example. And the only reason I could see why these people gain this status is because they had something unjust happen to them. And it's bad in the long term for those communities. Like George Floyd, for example, right? Um, Regardless of what you think, whether it was justified or not, he lost his life. It was in a tragic way. And people had a feeling of that injustice. And those are legitimate feelings. Like, we all saw the video. That video just the visceral reaction that people had to that video was someone was being murdered by the police in front of our eyes. We had a, a 9-minute video to go on, and that was a very damning video. No doubt about it. First came out, did not like what Chauvin did at all. It was like, this is a horrible cop. This cop deserves to be in jail. Um, that being said, George Floyd is not the sort of person that I would want anyone to emulate based on his life, right? Like, he was someone that needed help. You know, if he was struggling with addiction and things like that, which is stuff that came out during the trial, that's okay that he had an addiction problem. That doesn't undermine the injustice, right? Just because someone can be a horrible person and an injustice happens to him, and that is not right. That is wrong. And that injustice should be corrected, no matter who the person is. Okay? It could be someone that kills babies all day, every day. I don't care. If something unjust happens to them, we cannot be in a functioning society if that injustice is not corrected. That is the point of the justice system. It does not care who you are, or it's not supposed to care who you are. It is supposed to right wrongs as best as it can, because it can't undo a wrong. I mean, it can't do that. If it could do that, then injustices would have very little meaning beyond we're trying to perfect ourselves, because we can just undo them. No, it's supposed to correct, offer recompensation for that injustice. It's supposed to try and correct for it, even though it can't do it. It can't perfectly correct for the injustice. But it does the best it can. And it's for everyone.
It's the funniest thing about Waco to me is because, yes, the FBI way overstepped in terms of what they did at Waco. But if you look into the history of the Branch Davidians and David Koresh,
oh yeah,
holy, that dude was not a good person.
Nope.
He should not be the poster child of anyone, and there are some people who were part of that group who, yeah, that had greater injustices visited upon them simply because they were not responsible for doing some of the things that the leadership, David Koresh, was responsible for. Like, whoa.
Yeah. And
Waco was a talking point for decades. I mean, it still is in some circles. And
well, it's a talking point not as a way of life, basing it off of the people who were in Waco. It's a talking point against the injustice of what the state can do when it wants to. The thing is,
there are some people who will argue that, oh, they were just living their life how they wanted to.
Okay, ugh. Yeah, no, those people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the same way. It's like, same thing with George Floyd. Like, he wasn't the sort of person that you would want to model your life after. He's someone that you should have sympathy for, right? Like, he struggled with addiction, and that's sad. And that's a thing that a lot of people struggle with in our nation. is addiction. And it's okay that he struggled with addiction, but you shouldn't raise his life up as a standard that he was this great person, that he was this kind person that did all these wonderful things. I know we want to remember the best in people, um, which is fine, right? Like when we think about our loved ones who've passed, right? We always try to remember the best in them, even if while they were alive we thought they were complete douchebags. Like they did so many things that you would just be like, why do I even associate with you? But once the thing that once they're dead, we don't want to talk bad about the dead, which is fine. It's a good thing, right? But
I don't think it. I will disagree with you there.
yeah,
I do not think it's a good thing.
we should celebrate the good in people after they've
We should
passed
celebrate
on.
certain people, but it should not be at the expense of forgetting the reality that people are both good and bad.
Yeah. Well, no, that's where I say the line should be drawn, right? Like we should remember the good in people, but the people that we should hold up as examples, as paragons or people that we should want to model our life after they're dead, should be people who are good people. Like people who are did not have great wonderful lives that we should want to model ourselves after. We should remember the good things that they did, but they should not be like in the public limelight, right? Limelight, where they're talked about all the time about how kind they were and things like that. Um, there should just be nice things said about them, and then kind of put on the back burner or not talked about that much, right? Or at least not their lives, or not to constantly bring up their virtues, right? You say nice things about them, but you don't hold them up as these sort of paragons, right? And those who die that are good people, you hold up as paragons, that they get that attention, because it's like they had amazing lives, right? They did great things with their time here on this earth. So, I think all of these people who are getting held up as martyrs because of police brutality and being is bad. I think it's bad for their community. Like for the African American community. These are not I mean, I guess it's up to them to decide how they want to organize themselves, how they want to be. But I don't see how it's going to benefit their community in the long run if their heroes, their martyrs are people who commit armed robbery, who are addicted to substances, who deal in drugs, who are gangbangers. Like all of these people, like all of these things are bad. They don't bring about a community that's successful, right? It's not a culture that is going to be stable, is going to be able to thrive and get ahead in life. Um, I mean, it's not my place to decide what they do, but as someone looking in on this, I don't see how that is a good thing for them in the long run. But if that's something they want to do, I mean, my philosophy is always been let people do what they want. Um, and you can attest to my DMing style is I'll hand out as much rope that you want to hang yourself with as you want. Um, let people do what they want, even if it's going to be a bad end. But it doesn't stop me from raising up a warning to say I don't think this is a good idea. I think there's problems here. And I think it's everyone's duty because we're all in this. We all live on this world. It's not like, oh, Earth is going to crap, so let's move to Mars, where you can't get off the planet just because it's going to hell in a handbasket.
Sometimes
Uh,
I feel like that's Elon's plan.
yeah, Elon Musk woke up one day and read the news and was like, "Earth is going to hell in a handbasket. I'm moving to Mars. Let's make it happen.
Mhm.
I got to get to Mars before Earth destroys itself." Um, but yeah, no, it's as we all live on this planet and we're neighbors to each other, I feel like I have a responsibility to say, well, I don't think this is a smart idea. Um, I don't think it's good for your health. It's like if someone was shooting up heroin in front of me, I'd probably be like, that's not good for you, right? And if they said, yeah, I know, I don't care, it'd be like, okay, like I'm not going to stop the person, but if they want help and they don't want to be on heroin, I should help them and I should tell them that it's not good for them and they shouldn't be on heroin because it's not healthy for them. But at the end of the day, it's their life. Let them. I can't force them to do anything. Guess that's a downside. Maybe we should decide that we want to become authoritarians and that we're smarter than everyone else and force our will upon everybody. It'd make life easier, right? Right, Chris? Maybe.
That, well, I mean, to quote Winston Churchill, I mean, the best counter argument to democracy is spending 5 minutes with the average voter.
Oh, maybe that's what we should take up as voting next time. But I, at this point, what we would need to do if we were in a better situation for policing is start upping the requirements and over the process of 30 or 40 years slowly replacing our current police force with a higher educated one, maybe breaking them down into tiers and hiring a lot more police officers in cities. That's
Yeah, I mean, if if I was writing a 1990s crime bill kind of thing, it would be easier in that time and place when people are asking for more police enforcement to get reform done. And the the issue is going to be doing it right. And the authors of various crime bills through the late 80s and the mid 90s
this would be
pretty
Joe
much
Biden.
did not get it right.
Yeah.
But it's not, the problem is coming on this side of the cycle where they got it wrong and now we have to fix it is not really conducive to the kind of slow long term change that we like to talk about and we would like to implement, because the things that are more likely to be popular in the short term are more likely to get results in the short term, are more likely to be popular. Popularity of these kinds of reforms is important because it matters when the media and when people talking just day to day are going to go, oh, that was a bad choice. Because people are going to judge however things happen with change and with a lack of change, both, because choosing not to change is still a choice.
Yep.
People are going to criticize, and oftentimes most of the the talk is about a central issue where people want change or they don't want change. And the best opportunities for reform are not on those central issues because they immediately become a lightning rod for future criticism because they're already in the popular consciousness.
Yeah. Hold that thought for 1 second. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. We're back. Um
Mhm.
but yeah, no, it's yeah, we're just it's people are going to want change fast. And unfortunately, something like policing is not conducive. The wanting change fast is not conducive to a good long term fix to policing as a whole. And so, and with how the current situation is, I don't think we're going to get any sort of real fixes.
Not soon.
And this boils me down to a second backup point, which is let these community we should let communities vote, put it in their hands, and see if they want police. And if they don't want police, they They don't need police. They can replace it with social workers if they want, or mental health workers. And if they can get people that are willing to work and deal with these sort of things as mental health workers, then all the power to them. I don't think anything less than that is going to satisfy these people. And I think the extreme nature of it, I don't know. I think it might produce an environment that is better. Any solution we might have to offer is first going to have to correct the environment that we're in. And I think the quickest way to correct the environment to make it more suitable for our long-term plans, long-term solutions, is by giving the people who want to abolish the police what they want. Let these communities have no police or have social workers or whatever they want. But people without the ability to use lethal force, or who won't use lethal force except after it's already been used and someone's been killed or injured, and let these communities have what they want. I think it'll be horrific in the short run. I think their crime is going to spike and go out of control. I think many people will die as a result. And that's not a good thing. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing. But I don't see any other way that we're going to get actual long-term solutions that'll work towards an ideal policing force otherwise. Other than waiting another 20 years for the pendulum to swing back. 20 to 40 years.
Yep.
And then we'll have to wait another 80 or 90 years before we get an ideal police force. Like, those are kind of our two options, as I see it.
Yep.
Either that or overthrow American democracy for its own good. But that's not realistic.
No. Well, on that sobering note, I think we will end the podcast.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I'm out of things to say.
There's not much more to say. So it's a sad thing that the solution is either a bunch of people are going to die so that we can get working on this, or we're going to have to wait another century before we see real change. But that's all we're going to talk about tonight. If you have any thoughts, go ahead and leave a comment. We'll be back next week, same time, and we'll be talking about something. We haven't quite decided what we want to tackle next, but we will be offering long-term solutions instead of the band-aids that most people offer up as solutions. And with that, like and subscribe, and have a good night.